Hey everybody, Jim Kerr here. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Indispensable Conversation. Today I'm going to ask this question: can an emphasis on performance become chronic? Uh, I've got to welcome a really special guest, Eduardo Briceño. He's an incredible guy. I've known him for the last few years. He's got a great book out there called The Performance Paradox. It's all about how to institute a growth mindset in both yourself and your business. And it's because he's an expert in growth mindset that I thought he'd be the perfect guest to explore that question with me. So, Eduardo, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jim. Great to be here. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's great seeing you too. Let's jump right in. Do you think an emphasis on performance can become chronic?
Well, yeah, I do. And just to kind of, because I think I used to not be clear about what performance is. I thought performance is always a good thing. You can't have too much of it. Um, but I didn't realize how performance is about doing things as best as we know how, trying to minimize mistakes, right? When the stakes are high, say we're playing a championship final, that's when we're performing. We're putting everything we've learned into use and trying to win, right? If we're doing that all the time, then we can actually get in trouble. That's what I was unclear about, because when you're training, when you're trying to focus on getting better, you're doing something other than performing. You're focusing on learning, which is that you're trying new things, you're going beyond the known, you're asking for feedback, and those are different things than what we do when we than what we do when we perform. And so we often, all of us, I think, tend to get into chronic performance in different parts of our work and our life, and that gets us into trouble because it gets us stagnant.
Yeah. I feel like certainly in the organizations that I help through the consulting and coaching, that it definitely can be a chronic characteristic, that's baked into the culture of the organization. And I think it leads to some unhealthy results, right? There's things around burnout, decreased morale, reduced innovation. Um, Sometimes we focus so much on the performance and people feel so wound up about having to do that that they get, stifled a bit. Creativity gets hurt, innovation gets hurt, and employees are often discouraged from taking risks because they're afraid of what impact it might have on their perceived performance. I'm using kind of my finger quotes here, but I think for all those reasons, we've got to kind of find a balance to help employees with well-being and mindset, as well as making sure that work gets done and that the organization performs at a level that's competitive and growth uh, minded. Um, what are some of the primary signs that you're seeing in your work? And I know you do a lot of public speaking, and I'm sure folks come up and speak to you afterwards and share stories and stuff. But what are you seeing as sort of some of the signs that we're deep in the depths of chronic performance challenges, around the globe?
Well, and yeah, so it is a lot of a function of a culture, right? Whether it's a culture of an organization or the culture of a team. And at the individual level, is a function of our assumptions about what other people want, what we're supposed to do when we go to work. And so in organizations with a lot of kind of too much emphasis on performance and not enough structures and habits to foster innovation and continuous improvement, people are focused on trying to prove rather than improve, right? To prove how good they are rather than getting curious about how they can get even better, with the assumption that um, so learning is seen as something that only novices need or something who are not good at what they do, as opposed to you might be excellent, you might be the best in the world at what you do, but you can always get better, right? Like Olympic gold medalist or
Mm,
anybody can continue to improve. That's a growth mindset. And so in organizations that where they're stagnant because they're trying to be perfect, right? They're trying to be performing all the time. People feel more anxiety. They feel more pressure to minimize mistakes, and they might be talking about the importance of risk taking, but people only celebrate that risk taking when things go well, right? When the project ends up as people hope, which means that there wasn't a real risk to begin with, right? Because if there's something that involves risk, you don't know if it's going to go well or not. So
Sure.
then if you start only celebrating when things go well, then the only way to assure things going well is to not take risks, to not experiment, to stay within the known, and to just kind of stay performing all the time. And performance, like you said, is really important. That's how we get things done. That's how we contribute. But it is by balancing the performance zone and the learning zone, by integrating them into kind of what I call learning while doing, doing both at the same time, getting better as we do the work. But that involves different things than just kind of focusing only on getting things done and not on being mindful about how can we learn more, how can we experiment and innovate.
Sure. Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think that some of the signs that indicate that we've got too much focus on performance is things around high employee turnover, increased absenteeism, um, morale issues, engagement issues. So when I'm working with a client, let's say on a culture transformation project, some of the early work that we do is an assessment across those dimensions to see just where is that organization in regard to these indicators. If they've got high turnover, there's something going on, and sometimes that indicates that the performance emphasis is so great that they're burning people out, and as a consequence, people leave. So I see those things as being sort of key characteristics. It may not always be the performance focus that's causing that, but it tends to contribute to it. You know,
Yeah.
um, I'm wondering about employee mental health and overall well-being. Are you seeing much in the work that you're doing as an outcome of maybe too much of a focus on performance?
Well, I think certainly there's a kind of mental health crisis increasing in throughout
Yeah.
society, and I
Mhm.
think that that's a result of lots of things. I don't think that it is that there's more focus on chronic performance now than there used to be. In my impression, I think we, we tend to, as human beings, and by the way, by focus on performance, we can focus the paradox. And so my book is called Performance Paradox because um, if we're constantly performing, our performance suffers, right? But if we care about performance, if we care about improving performance, then the solution to that is to combine performance with learning. So we do want to care about performance, we do want to increase performance, but the way to do that is not to be performing all the time. Now, so I don't think that kind of myopic chronic performance issue has increased over time. I don't think it's higher now than it used to be. As human beings, we tend to have a cognitive bias called present bias, which is that we overemphasize and overvalue the present and undervalue the future. That's a psychology issue that we've had for thousands of years, and that's one of the reasons why we tend to focus on performing, because the way to maximize immediate performance is through the performance zone, right? But if we're always doing that, then we don't increase, we stagnate. So that's one reason. Another issue is societal issues, like, for example, Wall Street values kind of the current earnings and this quarter's earnings, next quarter earnings. And so that leads people to just be always exploiting rather than exploring, right? So being performing rather than learning and investing in growth. And so all of those factors, I don't think they've been there for a long time. If anything, I think people are becoming more conscious that the world is changing faster and faster, and that they need to kind of learn and to try new things and to experiment. I think that there's a growth more in consciousness about embedding learning into the organization
Mm.
and getting out of chronic performance. So that's at least maybe like that's what I see, in part because people are like, I see a biased set of people who are interested in that and come to me. But I do get the impression that society is becoming more interested in learning and more interested in embedding structures and habits for learning in their teams and organizations.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I don't think the emphasis has become any greater than it maybe has ever been. Um, I think what's happened perhaps is that because the emphasis has been so great for a very long time, and we're talking decades, probably the last 30 years, that shift is really, really focused on it. Particularly in the United States, and that's why you're seeing people like skip vacation. They're accumulating vacation days because they don't feel like they can take a break from work, and as a consequence, now I think it's come time to sort of pay the piper, where it's and I think it's the emphasis of the amplification came on really strong during the pandemic when people started to realize, well, whoa, what do I do now when I don't go to work? And there was sort of this agitation, and it led to a lot of different things, a lot of trends, people leaving jobs and early retirement and moving to different locations and all that. And I think it really, again, put a focus on the fact that we're working really hard and really performance oriented, and it has an impact. It has an impact on people. So now I'm seeing, clients are shifting what they're investing in. They're investing in health care issues related to employee wellness and mental health and all that. Where and I don't know if they didn't do it in the past, but they're doing it in increasing numbers now. You were going to say, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think what you're saying brings up to me kind of another realization, which is that I think as individuals, we also tend to focus on what's easily measurable, and organizations too. And the pandemic maybe like created a little bit of space in our lives to realize that, like you said, maybe a lot of us were kind of focused on chronic performance around kind of the things that were easily measurable, like for example, your income and are you going to get the promotion um, and then what we weren't doing enough of, and I think we're becoming more conscious of it, which can bring kind of depression sometimes because we see the issue and now we have to work on it. Is that on the things that were most important to us in our lives, like happiness, fulfillment, relationships, love, those things maybe we weren't working to improve on those things and to enrich our lives in those ways. And so I think you're right that we were kind of focused on chronic performance on certain things and disregarding the things that were most important to us,
Right.
and figuring out how do I engage in learning with or space or whatever I need to do to improve my health, my relationships, my happiness, and that creates a challenge, but also an opportunity for us to figure out how can I get out of chronic performance when it comes to these things and work to get better at those things.
Yeah, I'm with you, Eduardo. I feel like we've definitely come a long way in regard to awareness. There's a renewed awareness of how important it is to sort of put things in perspective and stop and smell the roses and all of that stuff. We've got a new generation of folks entering the workforce that certainly have that value higher on the list than perhaps you and I did when we started our careers. Um, I'm wondering, with this focus on performance, do you feel like it impacts team dynamics and collaboration? Kind of talking about the relationships, not so much outside of work, but within work. What are you seeing there?
Absolutely. When we are only focused on performing around kind of revenue or sales and that's it, we are not seeing each other and hearing each other and learning about each other's needs, or even our work preferences, right? In terms of like,
Hmm.
how are we working together? What am I doing that's helpful? What am I doing that's creating challenges? Because that takes a little bit of time and conversation away from the widgets, right, or away from the revenue or whatever it is that we're doing, in to focus on improving. Like, how can I be a better teammate, right? Or hey, if you're going through a challenge, how can I better support you? Um, and so when there's a focus on just performance, our challenges, like the way that our friction, for example, is something that goes unaddressed because we're just continuing to focus on just getting work done, even if the way we're getting that work done is not very effective and it's creating frustration. So by embedding, especially teamwork oriented learning conversations, then we can have not only a better experience at work and better relationships, but also then get more work done and more effectively so that we can increase our performance together. So collaboration, I think, needs to be both to perform and to learn, and to collaborate for both of them. Being transparent helps, like, sharing with what's in my mind that's relevant to our shared goals, whether it is performance goals or learning goals. When we make our thinking transparent and we have those conversations, we can increase both our learning and our performance.
Yeah, I'm with you. I feel like unhealthy sort of chronic focus on performance creates this competition sometimes within the organization and among the players in the company, right? And it erodes trust, and it can definitely lead to parochialism, where people are looking out for themselves and at the expense of the team and so on. So I'm with you. I think we need to place more emphasis on the importance of team and how we get more done together than by ourselves. And I think there are implications around how we reward performance, right? So in many, I'd say the vast majority of organizations, the emphasis is on the individual. You're going to get your bonus this year because you did this, versus you're going to get your bonus this year because your team was successful in accomplishing that. And you're seeing that, some organizations will sort of, some percentage will be team focused or company dependent, and some will be individual. But the overwhelming performance criteria is on the individual. And it seems like it's backwards. I think we're rewarding the wrong things. We're measuring the wrong things in that way, and as a consequence, we're contributing to burnout and all the things that we've already talked about today. I want to shift
I
gears a
agree.
little. Yeah, do you want?
Yeah.
Well, riff on it, man. Go
No,
for it, man.
I was just gonna say, add to that, that I think as a society we tend to, especially in the West, value competition and have this kind of theory that to increase performance we need to increase competition, even internal competition. And if you have people competing with each other, then they'll raise their performance. But when people are competing with each other, especially internally in an organization, they might withhold information from each other.
Yeah,
Um, and uh, and collaboration really is the greatest, along with learning, is the greatest human superpower. We wouldn't even
yeah,
survive as a species without collaborating, let alone thrive and become the most powerful species on the planet. So I can't agree with you more. So we need to observe, because often people talk very highly about both collaboration and competition without realizing that they're opposites. And
right.
so we need to figure out what is it that we value and how do we actually foster more collaboration, because that's the way to reach higher heights.
Yeah. And the thing that's going on recently, I'd say the last few years, there's a lack of cooperation. It's very, clannish. It's like, yeah, are you part of this clan or that clan? Are you right or are you left? Are you? And I feel like that has really hurt our ability to, get to a higher level of performance ultimately. So here we are talking about chronic performance, but we're actually behaving in ways that hurt performance. And if we just like realize that it is about cooperation, it is about collaboration, that there's power in numbers, and the team is the way to get there. Um, it would seem that we'd all be living a lot more comfortably. You know, which kind of leads me to the next question. I want to shift it a little bit away from performance per se and more towards well-being. So how do we help leaders in organizations start to make that shift so that they're, I don't know, balancing the need for performance with the well-being of their staffers?
Well, I think that there's probably a lot of solutions to that, a lot of different philosophies and cultures and habits and structures, goes ways to go about it. But I would love your thoughts. What do you think about it?
Well, I think we've got to create a more supportive work environment. So that's kind of stage one. Like, are we creating the right environment for our people to thrive, right? And it's about an emphasis on work-life integration and all that. I'm a person that's written about and pushed away from, work-life balance. I don't think it's balance, but I do think it's an integrative type of thing. We've got to learn how to fold that all into the way we go about our lives. And then, certainly provide resources for mental health and recognize that the rewards have to shift a little bit away from personal performance and more towards a team thing because I feel like we're setting people up to fail. We're setting people up to burn out if we continue to beat that drum like you're not, working hard enough. I think it can't be all about the individual. It's got to be more about the organization, the team, and all that. And that's all part of resetting sort of that work environment.
Yeah, thank you. That resonates, and I would just add, that like I'm sure you agree, like the people are the greatest assets for an organization,
Right.
right? In today's world, it's our collective brains, our collaborating brains that get things done, and so when we when people feel like their colleagues in the organization care about them and that they care about each other, then they can show up fully. And I don't mean as a whole person. Like I don't mean bring them all of themselves to work. There's different philosophies around that, but I mean feeling like the people around you care about you, support you. You can have conversations when you have a need,
Right.
whether it is work related or not, that is impacting work, and you can be there to take care of each other, and then people can get a lot more work done that way.
Yeah, we definitely need that culture to focus on trust building. And if we do that, then the parochialism diminishes because we trust each other and we realize like, okay, you're saying whatever you're saying, even if I disagree with you as a colleague, you're still trying to bring the best ideas forward. And that's good. That's a good thing. We need to encourage that. It can't just be my way or the highway. We want to get everyone bringing their best, like you say, their best selves to work so that they're contributing at the highest level that they're capable of. And again, a lot of the stuff you emphasize in your book is around creating those learning opportunities so that people are constantly seeking growth through learning and experiences, and that helps broaden their perspective so they bring more good ideas to the workplace.
Yeah, and I think that to one way to foster that sense of one team, of everybody in it together, is to emphasize what everybody has in common.
Mm-hmm.
For that can be the mission of the organization, the core values, the things that everybody's working toward together, and that brings us to something else that I think fosters well-being, which is a sense of purpose. And
Mm-hmm.
it's something that if the organization is doing some good in the world, which every organization has an opportunity to do that, even if it's within their workplace, right? Of to
Mm-hmm.
make the lives of the people who work there better. We when we have a common mission or purpose and we're collaborating toward that, I think that also fosters well-being because people have a need for meaning and fulfillment in their lives. They don't necessarily need to get that meaning and fulfillment through work, but when we can do it through work, then it enriches our lives
Yeah.
because we spend so much time working.
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up a really great point as it really relates to resiliency. If you want to create a resilient workforce, part of it is that sense of community. And if we can get the community focused on purpose, then we're feeding something inside the individual where they have an opportunity to grow too. Now they're experiencing these good things with each other, and they're making a difference, whatever that difference might be, and that feeds them. There's the idea of purpose feeding your soul. It's right there, and we as business leaders can create that type of work environment, that work setting that fosters that encourages it, and so on. Let's go to a kind of a couple last questions. We got about 5 minutes or so left, and I wanted to hear your stance on how companies can shift that focus from short-term performance to long-term sustainability and growth. And maybe you can talk a little bit about growth mindset and how that shifts and fits in there. I think that's where it's critically important.
Sure. So on the first question, it is so important to help people think about kind of the medium term and the long term, and where we want to be. How do we want the world to be different, right? In 5, 10, 10 years, like that's a long time, but even if it's just 3 years, um, because otherwise, if we're just focusing on the present, we get into that chronic performance, and then we end up not meeting our ambitious like aspirations, right? Whether it's
Right.
mission or purpose or revenue growth or whatever it might be. And so having like a vision of the future, a vivid vision of what we want the
Mm-hmm.
future to be, what we're working towards, that inspires people and it gives them clarity around what it is that we want to be trying and experimenting with and learning about so that we can create a better future. Um, and part of that, which tying to growth mindset, your question about growth mindset, is um, so we've talked about kind of difference between performance and learning. That's what we do and the strategies that we use, the structures we have in our organizations. Along with that, we also need what's called a growth mindset, which is the belief that people can change, that my abilities and qualities can be developed over time. And that belief is really, really helpful to engage in the learning zone, to engage in learning behaviors and structures. Because when we believe that we are set the way we are, like for example, if we're really good at something, it's because we're geniuses at it, we're naturals at it. That's called a fixed mindset. Then it tends psychologically to get us to focus on improving rather than improving. To when we
Mm-hmm.
receive feedback, act defensively because it hurts our ego, and there's nothing we can do about the feedback because we're set the way we are, right? It leads us when we label other people and see them as unable to change, then we withhold constructive feedback from them. We don't share the
Mm-hmm.
opportunities for improvement. So they don't know there's an opportunity, they don't do anything about it, and they don't change. And so a fixed mindset creates a self-fulfilling prophecy, regardless of whether we're thinking of ourselves as fixed or other people as fixed. So in order to be motivated and effective learners, we need first like a growth mindset, the belief that we can change. Second, the understanding and the habits for how to change. That's to get out of chronic performance, to engage in the learning zone, and to habituate it and systematize it. Third, we need a why. We need a
Mm-hmm.
reason why we want to put in this effort for both learning and performing. And then finally, we want to foster the sense that people feel they belong in a learning community, that people around them are learners. We want to be not only identifying what I want to improve, but sharing that with my colleagues so that they know what I want to improve, so that they can give me useful feedback along the way. We want to think about our weekly meetings and think about, are we only talking about performance issues, or are we also talking about kind of have agenda items that are about learning, maybe sharing the things we've learned recently or the mistakes we've made so that other people can benefit from that and avoid making those mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And so when those four factors are true, then we become a lot more effective at fostering continuous improvement and innovation because we're not only focusing on today and maximizing today, we're also investing for tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, so well said. You bring that out really strongly in the book as well. So thanks for sharing that with the audience today. I couldn't agree more. The organizations that tend to perform at the highest are the ones that are learning from mistakes. And, the whole idea of continuous learning isn't anything new. It's been around for quite a while. But so few organizations have really embraced what that means and instituted the processes to be able to do that. So as a consequence, they make mistakes over and over again, the same mistakes over and over again. They're not really a learning organization, even though they may say so in their vision statement. They're not behaving in ways that are consistent with that. And as a consequence, I think performance ultimately suffers. And there you go with that sort of that paradox, right? Like how do we have an emphasis on performance and yet do all the things that hurt performance? You know, you know. So hey Eduardo, thanks so much for being part of this. I could talk to you all day on this one. But I wanted to give you a chance to sort of share one last thought with the audience. What do you want to leave them with for them to sort of think about and ponder as we save so long?
Sure. I mean, I would, one thing to think about is what is, for us, each of us to think about what is my life about? What do I care most about? what is most important to me, and then think about, am I doing anything regularly to get better at that, right? To foster more of that, and what systems and habits do I have in order to continue to grow on those things that are most important to me. So that was something to think about.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing for me to add. You guys have all heard it through from Eduardo. He's the growth mindset expert. So uh, let's think about some things that we can do to get more of that, as Eduardo says. All right, man. Hey, thanks so much for the time today. I can't wait to talk to you some more down the road. And folks, stay tuned for another episode. We've got some more guests coming up through the rest of this season. Can't wait to bring those to you, along with those critical, indispensable questions that we always lead with. But for now, I want to thank Eduardo Briceño and appreciate you so much. So thanks, man.
Ditto. Thanks so much, Tim. Talk to you soon.